All legal cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Hey, Carl Rominger here, returning. 540-0580. I'm going to talk a little bit about what to expect with the Sandusky sentencing here in a minute. Since I have an exclusive inside line on that. But, Jason, you're up first. What's going on? Hey, Jason.
Hey, Carl. I have a question. The lady with the fence question made me think of this.
Yeah.
On my deed, it clearly shows that behind my property, there's an alley directly behind, but it shows that I own, it's, I think, 32 feet by 4 feet wide. It's just like a finger that sticks into a parking lot of the business behind my property. And it's paved, and it's used as part of their parking lot. And as far as I know, it's been like that for years. But the deed clearly shows it's part of the property. It's stated in the wording and the picture of it. So.
Right.
So how does something like that work? Do I own that, or is it no longer mine because of use?
Well, you own it. The question would be then, could they claim possession of it by adverse possession? I don't know how many years they've been using it as a parking lot. Or if they were using it as a parking lot, but there was historically permission, then they would have an easement over it, let's say, perhaps, or without permission even. But historically, they may have an easement by estoppel at this point or by prescription over the top of it, but you may still own it. So we'd have to do a little research and find out how long it's been a parking lot over there.
Okay.
And if it hasn't been a parking lot that long, it might behoove you to go ahead and go to them and say, I want to license this land to you. That way you can prevent them from ever taking it by adverse possession but not upset the apple cart, so to speak, and preserve your ownership right in it.
Well, I've only owned the property for 7 years, but I know it's in Mechanicsburg, and I've lived in Mechanicsburg for 20 years, and it's been that way ever since I've lived in Mechanicsburg.
Right. That's interesting.
So, it is interesting.
Very interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. It could be theirs. It could still be yours. That's a court question, but if they've been... It's a question of whether the possession has been adverse or not, because maybe it's not adverse to you, right?
No, it's not. I could make that argument. It hasn't been adverse to me at all.
And so there's a lot of questions that way, too. So it's a very factual case.
Well, the problem is, if you look at the history of the deed, the lot I own currently was, part of it was sold to where the house is next door, and behind it, which would have been a block, but it's more of a warehouse building, so it was incorporated into more properties that were bought.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that sections of what was once the lot that I own were sold off in pieces, and that piece just happens to not be sold with any of the others.
Interesting.
When I bought it, it was an elderly lady who had died, and the house was going to be auctioned, and I had bought it. And so the person who lived there and would have known is probably no longer with us.
Right. Very interesting. I mean, I don't know. We'd have to resolve that one on a piece of paper. I don't know. And the other question is, are you really being harmed? In other words, you've never really been using that property.
Well, no. The reason I have the question now is I'm probably going to be selling the property.
Right.
And if the question's asked of me, what about this piece that's shown in the deed that it's paved over?
I'd say my answer would be, to best of my knowledge, it comes with the property. It's what I paid for. But that's always been part of their parking lot for as long as I've been in Mechanicsburg.
Okay.
And I leave it at that, because the minute you try to say yay or nay, that becomes a separate issue. Now, if you want to clean it up ahead of time, we could always, file a declaratory judgment asking a judge to say this is your land or this isn't your land, to get the final answer on it. But that gets to be a lot of money.
I was going to say that the property is worth as much money to make that.
If it becomes an issue, you can adjust your price.
Okay.
I'll knock a couple thousand off the price for the uncertainty buyer. Or the other option is, hey, buyer, as part of the sale, I'll go ahead and take care of cleaning it up one way or the other. But I would wait until somebody raises it an issue.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an issue for me. I park there whenever I want, and they don't give me any trouble. So.
Right. So that's a good benefit all by itself. You got pavement to park on.
Yes, it is.
All right, man.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. 540-0580. I'm going to take a couple callers here in a second, but before we do, I just wanted to touch base on Sandusky for a few minutes. As you guys know, we're going up for sentencing. I'm going up Monday afternoon for a conference with the judge. We're going to go over the logistics. We've got an agenda for that the judge emailed out to us, so we know kind of what we're doing, which is pretty much what I thought we would be doing, which is kind of figuring out how everything's going to flow on Tuesday morning and making sure everybody's on the same page, nailing down lengths of time, presentations, etc. So it's nothing big or secret. And then on Tuesday morning, we will have the sentencing hearing, which would start off with an SVP, or sexually violent predator hearing. I don't anticipate that'll take long. My understanding is it's going to be mainly a series of stipulations, and the judge will look at a report from the state assessment, sexual offender assessment board, and make his determination on that report. Obviously, Mr. Sandusky's not admitting to anything, but is going to allow that report to be stipulated to. So we'll see where that takes us. Then we'll move right into sentencing. I anticipate that'll take some time. There are a number of 10 and 5-year mandatories that apply. So the absolute minimum sentence he could get, if the judge ran everything concurrent to one another, would be 10 to 20 years. So that's the absolute minimum sentence. The absolute maximum sentence is something like 200 and some years to 400 and some years. I don't anticipate either the absolute minimum or the absolute maximum to be likely. I'm guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 years on the minimum, with an equally high number, which would be double or more on the top end. Now, people have asked me about the appellate process, and I'll go through this really carefully. The first thing we do after your sentence is we have 10 days to file a post-sentence motion. This goes for any criminal case in Pennsylvania. The judge then has 120 days to decide that. That can be extended by up to 30 days to 150. The judge doesn't decide it within that either 120 or 150-day period. It's deemed denied, and then you can appeal to the Superior Court. If the judge decides it at any point during the 30-day period and he grants the relief you're requesting, like, for instance, a new trial, then the other side has up to 30 days to appeal that to the Superior Court. If your relief is denied, you have up to 30 days to appeal to the Superior Court. You don't have to file a post-sentencing motion, but then you can go straight to the Superior Court. But you have to file a post-sentencing motion if you want to ask for reconsideration of sentence or challenge the weight of the evidence. Other than that, pretty much everything else can be raised on direct appeal without the need for a a post-sentencing motion. All of that said, you can't raise ineffective assistance of counsel on direct appeal, although you can raise it in your post-sentencing motion, and if the judge grants a hearing on it, then it can be, if evidence is taken on it, then it can be decided on direct appeal. But the general preference is to wait until after the appellate process is over to talk about lawyer effectiveness and what's called the Post-Conviction Relief Act, or collateral relief, after the fact, which happens after your appeals. And the appeals through the Superior and the Supreme Court can be expected to take years. So long and short of it is we won't have final resolution in this case for many years to come. So what else did I want to tell you guys? I mean, that's pretty much it. So I'm predicting, probably somewhere around 40 years to something, give or take. I'm not certain where that's going to fall. Just want to give that explanation because we're getting a lot of questions from the media, but also from just people on the street about how the appellate process works in a case like this. So long and short of it, I wouldn't expect it to be resolved for a number of years. We'll have to go back to the trial court at least one more time with a post-sentencing motion before we'll get back up into the appellate court system. As for Mr. Sandusky, once he's sentenced, he'll be transported most likely to Camp Hill Penitentiary in Cumberland County, where he'll be classified and then sent to whatever appropriate state unit. And that's the way the state system works. Everybody goes into Camp Hill to start with, where they're evaluated and then sent out from there. So when I get back from break here in a second, I'll be happy to take questions. I got Bill and Greg holding on the line, and I will be talking with them. 540-0580.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Bill, you're on the air. What's going on, Bill?
Hey, Carl, I got two quick questions for you.
Yeah.
I was talking to an acquaintance who I was trying to encourage him to vote, and he said, well, I can't. So why not? He says, I have a felony 1 conviction. And is that true? If you have a felony 1 conviction, you're not allowed to vote?
I don't think Pennsylvania has any prohibition on felony convictions voting. I'm about 100% sure of that.
Uh-huh. Well, if that's the case, could he just try to register and see what happens, or what?
Yeah, I think he can register. Here, we'll check it out here. But what's your other question while we're looking this up?
The other quick question is, a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago, a friend of mine had a PFA placed against him. It was more or less a tactical move on the part of his wife.
Right.
And nothing ever came of it. It was dropped. They went through divorce and everything, custody battle and everything, and it was all settled. Does that PFA affect him at all as far as if he wanted to go purchase the weapon?
If the PFA is in place, if it's currently effective, he can't buy a weapon.
You mean even though it's 15 years ago, it's possible it was never removed?
Well, it should have an expiration date in it. It should have had an expiration date, and it should be done. But I would want to check that just to be certain. I can't imagine it's still alive after 15 years. It would have to be refreshed numerous times. I think the statute allows them to stay open for 3 years.
It was tactical. It wasn't even, and I think the minute, that they got through
the divorce, custody.
Well, even before that, they both got over the shock of the whole thing and got settled and got down to brass.
Yeah, no, if it's gone, it should be fine. It shouldn't hurt him at all.
Okay, great.
By the way, here you go. Under Pennsylvania law, felons who have been released from prison or who will be freed by the time of the election are eligible to vote. This is true even if they are on parole or probation. Only those felons who are incarcerated are not allowed to vote. Voting rights are automatically restored upon release from prison in Pennsylvania. And that's courtesy of the American Civil Liberties Union.
Awesome. So even if they're, as long as they're released, even if they're on parole, they can still vote.
Right, and they can still vote even if they're in jail, but will be released prior to the election, meaning that they can still register.
Is it too late to register?
No idea. For the general election, I don't know.
I wonder how I could find that. I guess
just Google it or call the county.
Okay.
All right, brother.
If anybody's listening, if they could call in and say something to you, that'd be great.
All right, my friend. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
540-0580. Greg, you're on the air. Hey, Greg.
Hi, Carl. How are you?
Good.
Good. I was listening to your show. I was out waxing the car last day to do that this year, I guess. But in any event, I came in and got a phone, and I was listening to the property lines and border disputes and things like that. And I ran into this problem in my old house, and I moved down here about 9 years ago, and also ran into kind of like the same problem. But in any event, up in Harrisburg, there was a fence right along my driveway in the back to an alley. Alley's about 8 or 10 feet wide, very, very narrow. And I hit it one night and backing my truck in, and my girlfriend pulled out, and there were some kids on bicycles. She didn't see them, and she clipped the fence. So I told the neighbor, I said, hey, I want to move this fence here, and he told me that's his fence, and his property lines are his.
Right.
So I thought, well, I don't know about that. So up against my property. So in any event, I had it surveyed, and he said there's 10 feet missing from the street, the pin on the street, and a pin down there. There was supposed to be an alley there, and it's actually his driveway. They never put it in, but they lost 10 feet. So they said that's clearly your property, but the fence is so old that you couldn't get a judge to defend you or to give it back to you. Nobody's going to, because I lived there so long. But they told me there's two things you should do. You should go back to not your deed, the people who guarantee
the title insurance?
Title insurance. Go back to them because they said that is your property. Secondly is you've been paying taxes on that square footage that you should have never been paying for. If it's somebody else's, you might not get your money back, but you should not be paying that.
Yeah, the tax authorities, though, probably aren't going to agree that it belongs to somebody else unless there's a judicial order changing the boundary lines. And the title company you're going to find usually has a bunch of exclusions in there, which includes unknown issues like actually what's on the ground as compared to what's on paper.
Right. Okay.
So,
I just knew those things, and I thought it's just easier.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are things to check out. I'm just suggesting that may be problematic. That's where you can file, again, a declaratory judgment and say this should no longer be mine. Although it's very rare I've ever seen anybody file a declaratory judgment and say this shouldn't be mine. What you do is you say this should be mine, and I want this straightened out. And if you lose, you'll lose, and then it's cut off and it's gone, and you live happily ever after. But you got to go through thousands of dollars in surveyor fees and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, back then it was probably about 10 years ago. It was like $800. But my neighbors were all asking me, what's going on? They surveyed it 3-4 times because they couldn't find this 10 feet missing. And it turns out I lost it off my property. And it turns out because he had the fence up, I lost it. Right. And it was part of my house is what I lost. But anyhow, that's all I had to say, but thank you for your time.
All right, my friend, take care.
You too, so long.
540-0580, Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Of course, throughout the week, if you want to get a hold of us, you go to romingerlaw.com, romingerlaw.com, romingerlaw.com. You can go to weekendappointment.com, of course. Shoot us a question there as well if you want. And the office phone number is 241-6070. It's 717-241-6070. So if you need to get hold of us in the office, it's 717-241-6070. And, of course, as you know, I come on here every weekend to answer your legal questions for about 2 hours. It's some Saturdays to 1 to 3. The show also plays on WLAN. We also have reruns available that play on Saturday mornings, and you can look those up on our website, romingerlaw.com, to see the times and locations for the reruns if you're interested in catching some old shows. And, of course, the podcasts are also stored here at WHP580.com. So if you want to go back and listen to an old show, you can do that. If you want to hear one of my Durgan appearances, those are all stored up there as well. And, of course, you know, I always like going on the Great Bob Durgan Show because we can talk a little more politics there. We always try to focus on the law here, try to keep you abreast of what's going on. I think we're pretty good on the law. You know, we try to answer people's questions, but the one compliment I get the most is that I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer. And there's going to be times, and you go visit a lawyer, you know, we're taught how to think, but knowing all the law is almost impossible. In fact, it's funny, when you go into a court case, a lot of times the judge will, you know, say, well, what's the law? And the joke is the lawyer should say, I don't know, Judge, you tell me what the law is. But the reality is that the two lawyers and the judge probably before they got that case didn't know what was going on. And meaning that they're not up to date on the latest and every little nitty-gritty of a certain legal nuance. And, of course, every case is a little different, so you have to check and see how those little differences might affect the case law. So it's interesting to prepare for a case. You know, what will happen? So to give you an idea, somebody comes into my office and they present me with something, and they say, well, you know, my neighbor's tree fell on my car, and I want to, you know, sue them because my insurance company is saying they don't have to pay for it. Well, then we got to kind of get into all the nuance here, like what kind of insurance did you have? Did you try your homeowners? Is it just your car exclusion? The neighbors, do they have a policy? Did the neighbors know the tree was going to fall down, or did the tree just fall down in a big storm? Or was the neighbor cutting the tree down? Or did the neighbor start cutting the tree down one day but then quit cutting the tree down because he realized he didn't have the right tools to do it? And then 3 years later, the tree fell down. You know, all these little factual iterations, and you have to see how the case law applies. And so each lawyer has a job of going out there and trying to figure out what case law helps them the most. A lot of times you have to go back to the client and just say, you don't have a case, and here's why. The ethical thing to do is simply, when clients have very bad cases, let them know that. Now, I have had clients who say, I realize that I'm probably going to lose, but I still want to push this forward strictly on principle, or I want to push this forward because I don't care. I like that 1% chance of winning that you've referenced, and I'm going to sink all my money into it. We still try to dissuade those clients not to go, but once we get to court, hopefully, if we're in a case that's going to be, if it's going to be decided by a judge, a lot of times the law isn't clear as to which way things should go. So neither side is really 100% certain on how it should be resolved legally, or more importantly, what we're waiting for is the exact facts. Because you come in my office and you tell me this is what happened, and I always look at the client and say, well, that's what you think happened, and that's what you're pretty sure happened, and that's your recollection. And the other side's going to remember it a little differently. And then the judge is going to decide what's proven. And the person who's going forward, the plaintiff, the person who brings the lawsuit, has the initial burden of proving their case, which means you can't just depend on, the judge to go, okay, something happened and it must have happened the way you told me. You still have to prove it. And if the judge finds you credible or finds your evidence persuasive, then the other side gets a chance to rebut that. So once the plaintiff meets their initial burden of showing the case, then the other side gets a chance to rebut it. And if the other side rebuts it, then they win. If they don't rebut it, then you win. And the measure would be the damages. But the judge has to figure out what the true facts are of the case as best as can be determined. Or if they can't be determined, you lose because you haven't met your burden. But if you can meet your burden to the facts, the judge will try to figure out what your damages are. So anyhow, long and short of it is it's possible to be involved in, let's say, an auto accident. And if the other driver disappears and is never found, you have nobody to sue, which means you can prove your damage. You can prove negligence because the other guy ran the red light and you have a witness, but nobody knows who it is. On the other hand, if the other person hits you, has no money and no insurance, you may be able to show who they are. You may be able to show you were hurt. You may be able to show you have damages, but you may be able to collect anything. And then other times, if the guy screeches to a halt, doesn't hit you, scares you half to death, and frightens you terribly, you may have a lawsuit to argue, he was negligent, he should have saw me, and he's going to say, I was negligent, but I caught my negligence in time and I didn't hit you, so you have no damages. And so you may have a case where, somebody acted negligently, but there's no real damages, or maybe he hit you and threw you up in the air and you landed on both your feet and not a bruise on you. So your damage is going to be very limited. So you have all these problems in lawsuits. Let's see here. Before we go to break, Norm, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. I have just a simple question.
Yeah.
I can't get the guy's name right. That Norquist guy?
Yeah, Grover Norquist.
Grover, that's what it is. All the people that have signed that petition,
mm-hmm.
Why isn't that treason? They're almost pledging allegiance to something other than the country. Why doesn't ACLU?
That's an interesting question. That's true. I'm signing a pledge not to raise taxes. I guess we need to read Grover's pledge and see what it says. Right?
Well, I've never read it.
I don't know. I think we need to find it and read it.
But I know that they've sworn allegiance to it.
By the way, just real quick, the last day to register is October 9th, for that other fellow who was listening earlier and wanted to know. Norm, that's an interesting question. You're right in a way. If you're swearing, they didn't want to elect Kennedy because they thought he was going to swear his allegiance to the Catholic Church, right?
Right.
And, of course, some people don't want to elect Romney because he's probably secretly working for the Mormon Church.
Mormon Church.
But it's okay to sign a pledge to Grover Norquist because it's a pledge that we like. He's secretly signing a pledge, or not so secretly signing a pledge to something that some of us like. Therefore, we're going to give him a free pass. But you're right. There is if taxes were per se unconstitutional, or taxes were per se not a power of government, well, then everybody who's voted for him would be wrong, right? But they're necessary at some level and to some extent. It's just a fight over how necessary they are. I mean, we wouldn't without taxes. We wouldn't have any money to blow up foreigners.
Right, they wouldn't. Right, so we could kill the terrorists.
Right, we wouldn't be able to fight the wars. So, as a result, or build the roads, or the bridges, or the social welfare programs, or anything else for that matter. So, signing it and saying that you won't do something that's a necessary function of government as a prerequisite to getting elected, I'm not sure. It's a great analysis, but I'll have to read it and talk about it. Your homework assignment is to read it and call me back next week.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a second or not? I remember seeing him on some show, and he had a big plaque on his wall with everybody. I don't know what it was, 60 Minutes or whatever the heck it was.
Yeah.
And he was real proud. Everybody swore allegiance, and if they don't keep their word, he'll make sure they don't get elected again. Reelected. There's got to be something treasonous about that.
I don't know. You got to read the pledge and get back to us.
Okay, I should.
Yes. That's your homework assignment, Norm.
Give it a try.
So what happens? You took one step forward and became a volunteer.
Okay.
All right, swear your oath.
Have a good day.
All right, bye. Got to go to break. 540-0580. Oh, welcome back. Welcome back. So the only headphones I could find here today weigh like 18 pounds. So I think I'm going to have a workers' compensation complaint against the people that run this little studio here. I can't even imagine what they did in the old days. I mean, these things literally weigh like 14 pounds. All the good headphones always get stolen. This is kind of like a, probably in any workplace. So I imagine if you work in a, like in a muffler repair shop and all the good wrenches disappear all the time and you can never find the good impact tools. Or if you work in a law office, you can never find the good pens or the good pads because everybody's always taking them. Well, here in the radio business, the microphones are literally anchored down. Otherwise, I think they'd take them home with them, too. But the good headphones, they walk right out the door. Hank, you're on the air.
Hey, listening to your last caller speaking about the pledge by Grover Norquist.
Yeah.
It's strictly a political document. It's not intended to be a legal document. It's unfortunate this guy spends so much time worrying about pretty much a politician pledging not to transfer wealth from the private sector into the public sector to redistribute it out. I mean, what part of the world does he live in? Does he think he's living in the government sector? Because he's living where the rest of us live, out in the public sector.
Now wait a minute. I understand what you're saying, but let's give him 1 second of thought here. What he's saying is, if a person who's got to make government decisions, okay, pledges that they will never raise taxes.
Yeah.
Now, do you agree that government at some point has to have some tax, right?
True.
So let's assume for a minute. Let's take our thinking caps for a second. I'm just going to walk you through this. Assume that you get what you want, which is government keeps cutting taxes down to the absolute bare bones. And
True.
So 10 years from now, all the tax cutting people you've ever wanted elected, cut it down to the point where the government's running as efficiently as a 12-cylinder Bentley convertible, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's just humming along, and it's great, and everybody loves it. And then all of a sudden, there's a new military threat on the horizon, and we're attacked by India or China or somebody, okay? Yeah. And the government goes, hey, we need to raise taxes because it's a time of war, and we need to really win this fight. And by the way, it's very expensive to fight these new high-tech wars with our robotic drones.
Yeah.
Would you say then that that maintaining allegiance to that pledge would be treasonous at that point?
Absolutely. But here's one thing about government spending on the military. Take, for instance, World War II. Well, the government will spend mad happily when itself is under threat. And in World War II, the government and sovereignty of the United States was under threat. So, of course, to preserve itself, it's going to fight like a Dickens and spend whatever it has to spend.
Well, no, I understand. And all I'm saying, though, is but if I was a member of Congress, let's assume the Republicans, remember, to get the taxes down, the Republicans control everything, and they go, hey, sorry, I can't vote for a tax increase because Grover's document, I pledged my allegiance to it, and I really meant it when I said it. Or are you saying that it's a political document, meaning that Republicans sign it with a wink, wink, nod, nod, we'll just disobey it when it seems politically convenient or the right thing to do?
Well, I agree a little bit with both of you, a little bit of what you said, except for the fact that Grover Norquist sprung out of the 80s. When there was a concern about the massive government spending, which today carries on. It's not ceded. It's a continuation.
Right.
And he may still present the same document, but he presented that document in the 80s and the 90s and it's the same issue. It's not so much the issue of taxation. It's the issue of overtaxation, and it's trying to get people aware of what politicians are sticking to, what their pledges are and whatnot. It's a political document. You're a lawyer. You probably would know that the courts would throw it out and recognize it for what it is.
Oh, yeah, I understand what we're talking about. And I think what the caller was saying, though, was swearing your allegiance to something besides the country, and when you're going to operate the country may be the issue. And the question is whether they're really swearing their allegiance. What you're saying is, I think, this is just something they're signing to help get elected, but if it really push came to shove, they're not really going to follow it.
True. For the scenario with wartime, of course, these politicians are going to look to self-preservation of themselves and the government they serve. And you know what? If it means they got to pump out every dollar in the economy to save the republic, that's what they'll do.
Right.
So that's any sovereign nation would do that. So that's all I had.
All right, my friend. No, I appreciate it. I think I think both of you have very interesting points on it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Hank. 540-0580. Today's like a politics day. Did you notice that? We're all heavy on the politics. But that's okay. We're getting close to an election, and we got to figure out what's going on here. I was talking to a guy in the parking lot the other day from Popalock, and he was telling me, he would like to see Obama go, but he agrees with me that it's the choice between the lesser of two evils. That, in other words, we're stuck these days not picking a politician because we want to, but because we have to pick the lesser of the two. It's kind of like a bad drug addiction. The drug doesn't get you high anymore, but you just have to take some in order not to be in too much pain. And the answer is, who do you pick? Who's the lesser of two evils in this election? I think the last time around it was pretty clear to me that the Republicans needed a good kick in the butt. I think this time 4 more years of Obama might be 4 years too many. But I'm not sure that Mitt Romney's the savior. Remember Taxachusetts, right? People talk about Taxachusetts. Well, didn't Mitt have something to do with that? And didn't he put the health care in place there? So don't be fooled by his sudden accolades. Rick Santorum was on here with RJ the other day saying, oh, yeah, he was really sounding the conservative voice. Come on, Rick. We know you're trying to remain relevant in the party. We know you're trying to hang tight and do your thing because that's what all the Republicans are supposed to do is rally around Mitt for the moment. But the reality is he's an Eastern establishment guy, wealthy Republican, not a Bible-thumping Midwestern Republican or Southern Republican. So he's the Eastern elite, and he's not gonna become this super conservative guy that you want. And big political interests, big industrial interests are going to thrive under Mitt Romney. The little guy's probably still going to be long forgotten, and just remember that. But he's still a lesser of two evils. John, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's going on? Hey, John.
Hi, yeah. I was just listening. I heard that last caller saying, well, of course, the U.S. is in war, and then we can raise taxes. Did he not stop to think that we are at war, and we are spending massive amounts on our military and our budget for defense?
I think the president called it at the debate a credit card. We put it on a credit. We put the wars on a credit card.
Yeah, I mean, if we have taxes for Medicare and we have taxes for Social Security, and we're really, in terms of discretionary spending, we're really not going to fix, let's be honest, no one's going to actually cut most of that. If we're cutting taxes during times of war, and we're pledging not to ever raise taxes during times of war, when does that guy think it's appropriate to actually raise taxes?
He thinks that, yeah, and I say we're theoretically talking about the document because we haven't read it, and I'm sure somewhere in there's some fine print that says, that there's some excuses for it. But, Governor Corbett signed it and said he wouldn't raise taxes.
He put several fees on natural gas and whatnot, which
fees. They're fees. They're not taxes. They're fees. It's obvious, right?
Oh, it's magical. Yes, it's wonderful how that happens.
No, I've not increased any taxes, just fees and surcharge. Hey, guess what? Wake up. When PennDOT charges you for your license plate, it's a form of a tax. Do you think that's what the license plate costs, you idiots?
Of course. No, it's not a tax. That's a fee.
Right. It's a fee. It's a user fee.
I just love everyone's, tax. Well, we've been in war for over 10 years now. I mean, when is an appropriate time to raise taxes?
I was just staring at the red dump button because I thought I might have to hit it. I thought I was going to go into a diatribe of expletives.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to trigger that, but that's why I was listening to that guy, and I was almost in a diatribe in my own car. I was,
and I'm not that upset with that guy. I'm just more upset with this whole thing where everything's got to hide the ball. I think there should be some truth. So, Walmart, when you get your paycheck from Walmart, I haven't seen one of these, but I'm told, they do a really good job of listing all the benefits you get. In other words, you see not only how much pay you got, but it'll show you how much they spent on your health insurance and how much money went into your retirement and how much of this, because they want you to see what they're actually spending on you and how much went for taxes and all these different things. So they have a very complete pay stub. And the idea is to educate the workers on where the money really goes.
Yeah.
And I think that should be, the gas stations should do that. Every gas station in America should have a sign on the meter, have multiple meters that show how much is going to the gas company and how much is going to the state and how much is going to the feds.
I'd love to see that for our taxes as well. I'm not anti-taxes. I just, if we're going to be complaining about taxes, let's figure out where it's going.
And then Durgan had some.
People are aware of that.
Durgan had another one of these land tax reform guys on talking about adding a sales tax and broadening the sales tax base in this state. It's coming. I just don't know where they're going to do it. And I don't know how Corbett's going to get around it because unless the state gets some massive infusion of money from somewhere, they're not going to do it. And the casino money hasn't.
Figure out some way to turn it into a fee. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
It's a fee. It's a membership fee.
You get to be a member of Pennsylvania. You have to pay your fee.
Right. Great. All right, my friend. I've got to go to break.
I want to talk about that. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. We get back from break. We'll talk to David about a DUI, 540-0580. See you guys in a minute. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Just to prove that the whole world goes in a big circle here, of course, we've been talking about Grover Norquist, right? And if you remember at the beginning, I was talking about the Maine Senate candidate, Colleen Lakowitz. Actually, they were upset about her previously saying that she wanted to drown Grover Norquist in her bathtub and saying, that shows the kind of just insensitivity and she shouldn't be a politician saying something like that. But Norquist has said that he's not in favor of abolishing government. Quote, I just want to shrink it down to the size where we can drown it in the bathtub, end quote. So funny little circle there. And we were also talking about Norquist, and people were saying, well, what's his position? Well, according to Alan Simpson, former Republican Senator Alan Simpson, co-chairman of the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform, he has been critical of Norquist's position, saying, quote, "No taxes under any situation, even if the country goes to hell," end quote. So there you have it. David, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's your question, David?
Yeah, I was charged with a DUI a couple years ago, and it was dropped down to public drunkenness, but it's still showing up on my background check that I was charged with DUI.
It may be possible after 5 years, a summary can be expunged.
Okay.
So you can have the summary expunged, but it may be also possible to get a partial expungement of the misdemeanor. It would definitely be possible after 5 years and get the whole arrest record off your record.
Okay, but there ain't no way to get that taken off now?
I got to look at that. There might be a way to partially expunge the DUI charge and just leave the public drunk behind.
Yeah, because it was showing withdrawal, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and if you get it expunged, it just won't show that charge at all.
Yeah.
How many years are you post?
Yeah.
How many years ago was it?
Oh, probably about 2.
Okay. Well, we could definitely look at doing the partial within now, but the whole thing later, okay?
Yep.
All right, man.
Yep, thanks.
540-0580. Margaret, you're on with Carl Rominger. What's going on?
I missed it. I tried to call the other week, and I missed it. I wanted to call and let you know about elder law. We tried them, and we were very pleased with them.
You're talking about Keystone Elder Law.
Keystone Elder Law.
Yeah, we had the folks from Keystone Elder Law here on the show, did a special for us, and we're hoping to have them back.
Well, I tried to call that day, and I missed it.
Gotcha. But you had a good experience with them?
Yes, we did. We were very pleased with all the work they did for us, and they were kind enough to come to our home because we couldn't make it to their office.
Well, that's Dave Nesbitt who runs that over there. Actually, I saw him Thursday night. He's a great guy. So, Margaret, thanks for the shout-out. I'm sure Dave will appreciate it.
Well, we were very happy with them.
All right, take care.
You too.
540-0580. Carl, you're on with Carl.
Hi, Carl. Appreciate you taking the call here. I guess I'm calling responding to a previous caller. There was a concern about, the taxation and everything. And I had heard, I'd like to see if you can confirm this, that by the government not ratifying a budget, it automatically increases 8% annually. And, if you project that out over 4 years, that's a 32% increase in your budget. No wonder everything's so skewed.
I don't know the answer on that one. I don't know. I do know that right now, if the Congress doesn't go ahead and do something here very quickly, there's a ton of automatic cuts in place, right?
There's automatic cuts, but then there's also the expiring
tax relief.
Tax relief, correct.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to see how this plays out.
I mean, I'm referring specifically to the fact that for the last 4 operating years, they have not put forth a budget. And by doing that, there's some rule that kicks in. It automatically increases all the budgets by an amount of 8%, which, is ridiculous if we're operating at, 1% inflation rate, as they say.
Yeah, and you think this is at the federal level?
At the federal level, correct. But at least that's what I've heard. I'm just trying to confirm that. So if anybody knows for sure, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, let's see here. The Budget Control Act also specifies automatic cuts of 7.8% annual rate.
Maybe that's it, 7.8. So that's approximately 8%.
I do not know. Very interesting, though. Here's the answer, and I got to come back to this. You got to spend money and make a government run. The question is, how much government do you want? And the problem is, everybody wants government when it's doing something for them. So everybody's always pleased to death when whatever their pet project is fixed. Or if you're a big art supporter and the government gives a grant to build a museum somewhere, you're very happy. If you're if you're a truck driver and they rebuild some bridges and smooth out some roads and lowers your wear and tear, you're happy about that. Of course, the truck drivers already pay for all that through their liquid fuel tax and every other tax that they're overtaxed on.
Right.
Trust me, on this show, we're a big fan of the truck drivers, and we know how overtaxed they are and how overregulated they are. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But that's for another day. In fact, we should do a whole show one time on just how terribly the government treats over-the-road truck drivers. But anyhow, of course, a couple of them probably listen to the show once in a while.
All right. Well, thanks again for taking the call.
All right, man. Yeah, really. I mean, really, we could. We could do that. I bet we could get a whole line of callers on here, too, talking about that. We could go over all the regulations, the way they're over-regulated on their driver's license. Listen, the public wants to, I'm afraid of big trucks, and I don't want dangerous drivers behind them. But we've gotten to the extent now where you don't have to be a dangerous driver to lose your commercial or your CDL license. You just have to have enough technical violations. And you got to fill out these logbooks, and you got to fill out these reports, and you got to do all these different things that most I would garner that the average profession that's a lot more dangerous has to do a lot less. Anyhow, guys, I'll be back next week. RomingerLaw.com, ROMINGERLAW law.com, RomingerLaw.com. 241-6070 is the office number, 717-241-6070. Carl Rominger here answering all your legal questions. I'll see you next week.